special education teacher's role and inclusion. Let's take a look. So the special education teacher has a number of complex roles in the successful implementation of inclusion across the school setting. The ability for the special education teacher to follow through with his or her roles is impacted by all other parties, including the culture for inclusion in the setting and in the individual education program team. The special education teacher's roles for inclusion include the following: knowing his or her roles. You have to be informed, teachers. You gotta experience all of the different ins and outs of the school, of expectations of the culture. The next, advocating for inclusion in the school setting. That's a huge unbilled job that the special education teacher needs to do. You're the inclusion advocate also, which is a full-time job actually, aside from being the teacher and the case manager of your students. But you have to be the advocate for inclusive education in your school, because oftentimes you're the one who can most clearly see the need for it. You have perspective in the special ed room and the general ed room, communicating with families and seeing what their wishes are, and also working with the students. Participating in annual IEP meetings and addressing inclusion. That's a big part of the IEP meeting. Like, how will you be inclusive? How much will the student be in the general ed versus the special ed setting? That's a lot of conversation that needs to be had with families and with school staff, with your team. Helping the IEP team, the individual education program team, to select an appropriate and accessible schedule that meets the needs of the student in the least restrictive environment. So deciding on how much can they handle, what supports need to be in place, scheduling it so that there's enough coverage and enough supervision and support for them to be successful. Identifying appropriate goals and objectives on the IEP in the context of inclusion. So if you're going to be writing a very clear, specific, measurable program for your student, why not include something that supports them being included? That's I think a really important point. Write it right into the IEP, whether probably in the adaptation accommodation section, but also even with goals and objectives, like where will the goals be measured, who will measure the goals, where will they be carried out, and do they address academics that can be supported in the general ed setting, or social skills or communication or whatnot that can be supported in that setting. Identifying appropriate accommodations, adaptations, and modifications on the IEP in the context of inclusion. So yeah, you need to figure out what does the student need to be successful, whether it's extra time or special placement in their desk, or extra help with hearing. If there's a microphone that the teacher can be using so that everybody can hear in all parts of the classroom, or whether it's changing certain lessons, or homework expectations, or alternative homework expectations. So all those things should be considered by the special education teacher. Ensuring that students will be supervised as needed. That's a huge issue. It's very, very difficult to make sure that all of the students on the caseload of the special education teacher has proper supervision. If you have if you have a spread of grade levels, maybe you have in the past I had 6th, 7th, and 8th, and and we only had, there's 3 adults in the class. There's 2 paraprofessionals and 1 teacher or whatnot, and you have to figure out, can we send kids to all these different grade levels and provide coverage for somebody who needs to stay in the special ed room for whatever reason. It's very, very difficult. Then you have to account for providing um, allowance for people to have their lunch break, their 10-minute or 15-minute break in the day, and how will there be supervision and coverage and support that are appropriate for all students during those times. So something to work on as a team. Providing clear expectations, about behavior and consequences, and work in transitions to students. So yeah, getting the norms set up that are clear. And also I would add to that is providing expectations and norms about how inclusion will be handled in the general ed classroom. That's kind of on the special ed teacher to remember to do that, because it's not a given that's going to be built in to the general ed program. Which reminds me, I should do a video just on creating norms for inclusion. We'll do that another time. Ensuring that students with special needs are not segregated within the general education setting. In other words, you don't want to see the kids in special education be sitting in the back at a table all together. They should be integrated into the class. It shouldn't be based on disability or ability or what have you. It should be an integrated classroom. Ensuring that safety evacuation plans are in place. There needs to be some conversation, like if there's students in different parts of the building and there's a fire drill or whatnot, or a tornado drill, who will take those students out and how will they get out? Will they get out with the rest of the class? Will they go to the elevator? What's the plan? So there needs to be clear communication and planning, obviously, but it needs to be stated, because if there's an emergency, of course, you'd want to make sure that was part of the conversation in advance. Collaborating with the general ed teacher and parents to identify appropriate homework and apply adaptations, accommodations, modifications. So just being collaborative. There's the different models of collaborative teaching, talking about how you can collaborate and do collaborative teaching. Co-teaching is another word for co-teaching. So that the teacher is doing more than just sitting quietly in the class. The special ed teacher shouldn't just be sitting in the classroom all the time quietly while the general ed teacher does all the work. That's not a good use of the professional capabilities of all the people involved. That you could put everybody's professional experience to use and support everybody in the class, whether it's in special ed or general ed or whatever. So being collaborative, making sure that homework is also adapted, and that's part of the conversation. How will homework apply? Because parents get confused, and it needs to be just clear and part of the conversation. Even if the answer is going to be that certain homework will be exempt and others will be adapted, that's part of the conversation. Including parents in conferences, open houses, and orientation greetings. Special ed needs to be always on guard for are the parents being left out of those things, because oftentimes I've seen in the past that if we're not on guard, then nobody else, it kind of falls through the cracks, and parents get left out, and then that feels really bad for everybody. Seating students with disabilities in the same manner as the rest of the students, not grouped together. We kind of covered that, just making sure that they're, like the other students, they have access to what's going on. They're not in some special corner or segregated. Including students with disabilities in class photos and assembly seating areas. It's really embarrassing when there's a group of the entire school, but then the special ed program is left out. It looks bad for the school. It's hurtful. It doesn't promote the kind of culture that we want with inclusive environments and inclusive communities. Um, Keeping data on removal due to behavior and addressing it with the IEP team. If that's an issue, it's not always going to be an issue where there's behavioral removals, but if there is, that needs to be on the radar of the special ed teacher, so that there's not too much missed time. Viewing all students as their responsibility, including students without disabilities. So the special ed teacher needs to see the whole school as their responsibility, not just the 8 kids on their caseload or the 12 kids or the 20 kids or whatever it is, 25 kids, depending on what program it is. But the special ed teacher needs to see the general ed kids and know their names and reach out and make those connections. Otherwise, it's going to be even that much more challenging for the kids in special ed to make those connections if the general ed teacher thinks that they're separate and not part of the community. So, and vice versa, the general ed teacher needs to see the kids in special education as part of their community too. We'll get to that in another video. Let's see, referring to students with disabilities as our students and using people first language. People first language, or I've made another video now about people who prefer like taking ownership of the disability, and they don't mind using that as the language, but it needs to be based, ultimately needs to be based on what the individual prefers. If that's a conversation that can be had with each student, that should be had, or if it's more appropriate to have it with families, that's fine. But it needs to be part of the mindset that people need to have that conversation. But at any rate, all students are our students, not your students. Your students need to go here or there. Our students need to do this, and this is the plan for our students. Adapting course materials is needed. Yep, you gotta work on those course materials. It should be clarified in the IEP, the individual education program, exactly what is appropriate for adaptations, and you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Usually there's some things that you can draw from in your toolbox, and from time to time you do need to really come up with what is this individual need that's unique for them. That might be necessary, and then you need to have that conversation. So seeking out professional development that addresses students with disabilities, another thing the special education teacher needs to do. And they'll probably be compelled to do that to continue their licensure every 5 years in Minneapolis. We have to do relicensure, and we need a certain number of continuing education credits, or whatever they're called, CEUs, to maintain our licensure with the Minnesota Department of Education. So I would hope that people could find some inclusion related professional development opportunities, because we shouldn't have to just feel our way around and learn it through trial and error. It should be trained. We should be trained in it and provided with some resources and I don't know, some at the very least go through a PowerPoint and see what some strategies and talk about those strategies, and at the best observe other classrooms that are doing it properly and having success. Discussing the options for co-teaching with general education staff. So just discussing co-teaching, bringing it up. If your school is already doing it, find out how you can do it more and more. And if you haven't done it yet with your school, start with one lesson, maybe one lesson in a class. Ask if you can co-teach with a certain lesson, and maybe build it into more than just one. Maybe it's one whole class where you can co-teach, and then build from there. That maybe it's more than just one class. Maybe it's it's half the day, or ultimately maybe most of your day is, or all of your day is through co-teaching, also known as collaborative teaching. So having high expectations of students with disabilities, you need to model that so that everybody in the school understands and follows that model. There's all too often low expectations of people with disabilities, so it needs to be considered. Making use of assistive technology in class and talking to the general education teacher about what options are available. So using communication books or iPads with um, language tools on them, or whatever that is available. Use whatever's available. It doesn't have to be perfect, but even something is better than nothing. A little a switch, the student can press a button and it says something that might be something for a student who's nonverbal. So, or rather than saying a student who's nonverbal, you could say a student who relies on assistive technology or to communicate. Making use of assistive technology also is something that you need to talk with the district about, where you're working, or maybe there's people who can support you getting better technology. I know in Minneapolis there's a department that actually will build and work with you to figure out adapted tools or even furniture for the classroom that makes a more successful experience, more accessible experience. And finally, on my list here, I got treating students with disabilities with respect, dignity, and patience. Yes, that's the special education teacher's role, and don't forget that, because it's easy to lose your patience. It's easy to, after a long day, it's easy to lose your temper, and it's important to keep that as a priority, because you're going to be as a special ed teacher, you're going to be the leadership that when it comes to inclusion, most likely in your school, and people will base their own behavior and the way they talk and act around how you do it with the students that you work with. So there you go. That's the special education teacher's role in inclusion. Of course, in any given school setting or environment, there might be different expectations and roles. So this is just one take on it. This is something that I compiled based on my observations and my experience, and conversations I had with my colleagues over the years. But if you have additional ideas, please leave your comments below. If this was useful, give it a like, share it if you would like, and please subscribe to my Inclusion Space channel on YouTube. Have a great day. Thanks.